Ethiopia shall prosper. Ethiopians shall live in peace. Ethiopia shall overcome. Ethiopia shall prevail. Because standeth God within the shadow, keeping watch above his own Ethiopia. Hello families of Ethiopia today. Welcome. Ethiopia, a country with glorious history and culture of 3,000 years. As promised, our today's presentation brings the second and the final part of the recent commentary by Professor Alemayo Ghebre Mariam. Professor Alemayo teaches political science at California State University San Bernardino. He is the senior editor of the International Journal of Ethiopian Studies, a leading scholarly journal on Ethiopia. We invite you to stay with us, and please also like and share the video and help us reach out to more audience as much we can. First-time visitors, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Then you won't miss out very important and the exciting videos we bring to you. Let's get into the presentation. Indeed, it is highly likely Mangi was selected precisely because she can be trusted to deliver a body blow to Ethiopia on behalf of the terrorist TPLF come what may, says the scholar. R2P. Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. In the end, Mangi torpedoed the UN Human Rights Council with her blatant partisan support for terrorist TPLF, Alemayo adds. Mangi had been on the council for less than 3 months when the ICHRE report on Ethiopia was issued. It is interesting that Mangi has a history of sabotaging human rights investigations, he continued. Between 2009 and 2010, Mangi served as Vice Chairperson and Commissioner of the Kenya Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission in her own country, Kenya. That commission was established after Kenya's 2007 presidential election, which sparked violent clashes over electoral fraud allegations. In that violence, nearly 1,500 people were killed and almost 300,000 were forced to flee their homes. Following the violence, a power-sharing coalition government was established which authorized the creation of a Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission, TJRC. The mandate of the TJRC was to investigate and recommend appropriate action on human rights abuses committed between December 12, 1963 and February 28, 2008. The TJRC was also tasked to establish as complete a picture as possible of the causes, nature and extent of the post-election violence. As Vice Chairperson and Commissioner of the Kenya Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission, Mangi proved to be divisive and ineffective, Alemayo noted. Mangi resigned, claiming she was unable to continue given the public position I have expressed with regards to matters facing the Commission's chair. Mangi said she was resigning because the Commission's chair was unfit to hold such an office due to his past record as a senior government official. However, the hypocrite Mangi did not refuse to accept nor offer to resign after her past record showed she is a dyed-in-the-wool terrorist TPLF supporter, he continued. So, what happened to the TJRC? In its 2013, the TJRC reported the following, among many other things. Firstly, between 1963 and 1978, the government of President Jomo Kenyatta was responsible for numerous gross violations of human rights, including killings, torture, and collective punishment, denial of basic needs and arbitrary detention of political opponents and activists. Second, between 1978 and 2002, the government of President Daniel Moi was responsible for numerous gross violations of human rights, including unlawful detentions, widespread torture and ill-treatment of political opponents. Thirdly, between 2002 and 2008, the government of President Mwai Kibaki was responsible for numerous gross violations of human rights, including unlawful detentions. The fourth and the last, security operations in northern Kenya were accompanied by systematic and widespread torture, rape and sexual violence against girls and women. In spring 2009, the Kenyan parliament turned down a constitutional amendment bill for a special tribunal for post-election violence. On March 31, 2010, the International Criminal Court (ICC) opened an investigation into the post-election violence. 6 individuals, including the Deputy Prime Minister, an ex-minister, and an ex-police chief, were ordered to appear before the court in The Hague. Ironically, while I engaged global public opinion to fully prosecute Kenyatta and Ruto before the ICC, Mwangi did not utter a word, says Alemayo. Now, Mwangi becomes a champion of human rights in Ethiopia while she callously turned a blind eye to the deaths of 1,500 Kenyans and displacement of 300,000 of her own brothers and sisters. Kenyan Nobel laureate Wangari Maathai wrote, "The real intention of the Just Formed Truth, Justice, and Reconciliation Commission, TJRC therefore, is to facilitate impunity, hoodwink and massage the victims and yet again, sweep the crimes under the carpet. None of the leaders has ever been made to account for crimes they commit against the state. Why now? Radhik Coomaraswamy and the Myanmar hit job." Radhik Coomaraswamy, a Sri Lankan, is the third member of the Ratner hit team sent to Ethiopia, he continued. Coomaraswamy is the former UN Secretary-General's Special Representative on Children and Armed Conflict. She also served as chairperson of the National Human Rights Commission in Sri Lanka from 2003 to 2006. Coomaraswamy's claim to fame is that she was the lead author of the 418-page global study on the implementation of Resolution 1325, full involvement of women in all efforts for maintaining and promoting peace and security, published in 2015. In 2017, after alleged atrocities against the Rohingya people in Myanmar, Coomaraswamy was appointed a member of the United Nations Fact-Finding Mission on Myanmar. In 2018, the Coomaraswamy expert panel accused Myanmar authorities of committing crimes against humanity including murder, imprisonment, enforced disappearance, torture, rape, sexual slavery and other forms of sexual violence, persecution, and enslavement. Committing crimes against humanity which meets the legal requirements of war crimes, murder, cruel treatment, outrages upon personal dignity, attacking civilians, displacing civilians, pillaging, attacking protected objects, taking hostages, sentencing or execution without due process. Committing rape and other forms of sexual violence on a massive scale, and committing arbitrary and frequent denial of humanitarian assistance to people in need and blocking movement of relief personnel for long periods of time. Coomaraswamy Group recommended prosecution of senior generals of the Myanmar military for genocide, crimes against humanity and war crimes in an international criminal tribunal. Coomaraswamy was a UN Special Rapporteur on violence against women from 1994 to 2003. In 1996, Coomaraswamy submitted an addendum to her report on violence against women to the United Nations Commission on Human Rights, citing evidence that proved to be a hoax and a fabrication. Coomaraswamy effectively committed academic fraud by using the fabricated evidence of Yoshida Seiji, who claimed to have worked during World War II as a labor mobilization manager and witnessed sexual exploitation, comfort women, of Korean women by Japanese troops, to bolster her credentials as fighter for women's rights. What is extraordinary is the fact that in her investigation of human rights violations in Tigray region, Coomaraswamy reported no evidence of violations of the rights of children, even though she was a celebrated UN Special Representative on Children and Armed Conflict, according to the scholar. Conscription of child soldiers by the TPLF has been documented extensively by the BBC and other sources. Alemayehu has documented with video evidence the top TPLF terrorist leader stating in an interview that the war will be a people's war, starting with children. Despite ample evidence of use of child soldiers by the terrorist TPLF, Coomaraswamy, Ratner and Mwangi turned a blind eye, deaf ears and muted lips, he adds. Ratner, Coomaraswamy, Mwangi and the Ethiopia hit job. The mandate of the International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia is: firstly, to conduct a thorough and impartial investigation into allegations of violations and abuses since the 3rd of November 2020 by all parties to the conflict. Secondly, to establish the facts and circumstances surrounding the alleged violations and abuses, to collect and preserve evidence, to identify those responsible for future accountability efforts. Third, to provide guidance on transitional justice, including accountability, reconciliation and, fourth, to engage with all relevant stakeholders. The main conclusions of the ICHREE Commission quoted directly from the report are as follows. First, the Commission finds reasonable grounds to believe that the ENDF shelled Mekelle on 28 November 2020, killing and injuring civilians and striking civilian objects days after Tigrayan forces had left the city with their assets. Second, the Commission finds reasonable grounds to believe that the ENDF conducted a drone strike against the Djibouti IDP camp on 7 January 2022, killing and injuring approximately 60 civilians and destroying civilian infrastructure. Third, the Commission finds reasonable grounds to believe that Tigrayan forces killed civilians and persons rendered or de combat, raped, looted, and damaged or destroyed civilian infrastructure and property in Kobo and Cheni in late August and early September 2021. Fourth, the Commission finds reasonable grounds to believe that the ENDF, EDF, and Fano have committed widespread acts of rape and sexual violence against Tigrayan women and girls. Fifth, the Commission finds reasonable grounds allied regional state governments have implemented a widespread range of measures designed to systematically deprive the population of Tigray of material and services indispensable for its survival, including healthcare, shelter, water, sanitation, education and food. The ICHREE report has been meticulously and rigorously refuted point by the Ethiopian government, Professor continued. The Ethiopian government's rebuttal is a tour de force of legal and methodological analysis. Alemayo recommends the audience to review the rebuttal in its entirety. Methodological flaws, failure to adhere to UN evidentiary standards and its own terms of reference render the ICHREE report useless. In light of the thorough rebuttal of the Ethiopian government, he focuses on some of the major methodological and technical legal issues concerning the ICHREE report. First, the ICHREE asserts it conducted its investigation and prepared its report with limited time, staffing and access to sites and documents and had to select a specific and manageable preliminary group of incidents and themes in its investigation. The ICHREE also claims to have applied the evidentiary standard of reasonable grounds to believe and conducted its investigation in accordance with the practice of United Nations fact-finding and investigative bodies. As a technical evidentiary matter, the threshold reasonable grounds to believe standard is problematic but applies in considering whether a crime has been committed, and whether the defendant is criminally liable. The standard further applies to infer mutually exclusive reasonable conclusions that a crime has been committed, and equally another reasonable conclusion a crime has not been committed. The ICHREE's report provides little or no explanation on its application of the reasonable grounds to believe standard and the specific investigative methods it used to collect and analyze evidence. It offers no indication on how to test the credibility of the evidence it collected and expects its vague and unsubstantiated conclusions to be accepted ex cathedra as infallible. The Ratner, Mercenary Hit team reports it applied the reasonable grounds to believe standard in a select specific and manageable group of incidents and themes for which it could complete investigations in 2 months with limited resources. The fact of the matter is that ICHREE only gives lip service to application of reasonable grounds to believe standard as the Ethiopian government response has shown in its meticulous rebuttal. The ICHREE report fails to meet the minimum threshold for reasonable grounds to believe as it provides little or no explanation on the circumstances of the crimes, the time and date or duration of alleged crimes corroboration or verification. The glaring omissions and methodological flaws of the ICHREE can best be seen in comparison to the work of the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission EHRC or Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights OHCH, a joint investigation. That investigation involved field work of nearly 4 months in various locations throughout Ethiopia under challenging circumstances with nearly 270 confidential interviews with victims and 64 meetings with a variety of stakeholders. The governments of Australia, Belgium, Canada, Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, Iceland, Ireland, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Norway, Sweden, the United Kingdom, and the United States commended OHCHR and EHRC for their impartial and transparent work. Indeed, the Ethiopian government accepted that report and is implementing its recommendations. The Ethiopian government has rejected the Ratner HIP team's report in its entirety. Second, the ICHREE was mandated to conduct a thorough and impartial investigation into allegations of violations and abuses committed since 3 November 2020 by all parties to the conflict, by building upon the report of the Office of the High Commissioner and the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission. The ICHREE failed to honor its mandate and ended up preparing a report that not only contradicts but also trashes the highly commendable 2021 joint OCHRA and EHRC report. Third, the ICHREE failed to honor its own terms of reference, the document which sets the objectives, scope of work, activities, tasks to be performed, respective responsibilities, etc., which provides the ICHREE will build upon the findings, conclusions, and recommendations of the report of the JIT, 2021 OHCHR and EHRC findings, in a way that adds value and avoids unnecessary duplication of effort without limiting the temporal or geographic scope above. In its rush to judgment, the ICHREE completely ignored the 2021 report and findings, choosing to reinvestigate events already investigated rigorously and given conclusion. Fourth, the ICHREE's admission that it conducted most of its interviews remotely, virtually, and used satellite imagery, print and audio-visual material, and open-source information as evidence that meets the standard of reasonable grounds to believe is outlandish, outrageous and shocking, Alemayo continues. The ICHREE's random and causal use of satellite imagery, print and audio-visual material, and open-source information in clear disregard and flagrant violation of the 2015 UN Commissions of Inquiry and Fact-Finding Missions, Guidance and Practice, audience advised to refer page 40 to 48. The open-source information used by ICHREE is largely Western fake news and yellow journalism, he adds. The UN guideline requires corroboration and independent verification of information obtained in an investigation, which the ICHREE report disregards. Fifth, in flagrant departure from the UN guidance and practice, the ICHREE allegation ENDF soldiers committed extensive extrajudicial killings, arbitrary detention, and looting and used civilian objects for military purposes and restricted access to medical treatment was unsupported by a single witness testimony. Sixth, the ICHREE aims to create moral equivalency by dignifying the TPLF terrorist group, declared as such by the Ethiopian parliament, militarily occupying Tigray as the regional government of Tigray. The ICHREE aims to lift the image of the terrorist group in the eyes of global public opinion by sanitizing it from a terrorist group to a government. Seventh, to add insult to injury and beyond the scope of its mandate and authority, the ICHREE dictates that the Intergovernmental Authority for Development, IGAD, the African Union Peace and Security Council, and UN Security Council place the situation in Ethiopia on their agendas and take action aimed at restoring peace, stability and security in the region, thereby preventing further violations and abuses of international human rights law and humanitarian law. After all is said and done, the single most outrageous element of the ICHREE report is its recommendation of R2P, responsibility to protect, or humanitarian military intervention. Kari Mwangi finally got her wish. Million-dollar question, what will happen to the ICHREE report? What happened to the UNHCR report of Cambodia? What happened to the UNHCR Myanmar report? What happened to the UNHCR Sri Lankan report? The ICHREE has requested a one-year extension of its term. The fact of the matter is, with the government of Ethiopia's complete rejection of the report along with many other countries including China, Russia, India, it will prove to be a flash in the pan, the scholar adds. The fact of the matter is also that the US, EU, UN and certain Western European countries established to pressure and embarrass the Ethiopian government and force it to negotiate with the terrorist TPLF. They also hoped they could use the report to advocate global sanctions against Ethiopia. The fact of the matter is that the US, EU, UN and certain Western European countries wanted to use the report for a 2P, that is humanitarian military action in Ethiopia to protect the terrorist TPLF, he underscores. None of the above seem likely. Joe Biden, the great warmonger, seems to accept the reality of African solutions for African problems. The weaponization of the UNHCR as a neo-colonial tool has not gone unnoticed by African leaders, Alemayo continued. The weaponization of the UNHCR to criminalize African leaders as human rights outlaws with a long-term agenda to undermine African sovereignty, unity and territorial integrity is not lost on Africans. In August, South African Foreign Minister Naledi Pandor gave Blinken the dress down when he visited South Africa. Because when we believe in freedom, as I'm saying, it's freedom for everybody. You can't say because Africa is doing this, you will then be punished by the United States, the minister said. One thing I definitely dislike is being told either you choose this or else, Naledi Pandor adds. When a minister speaks to me like that, I definitely will not be bullied in that way, nor would I expect any other African country worth its salt to agree to be so treated. During the interactive dialogue in the General Assembly over the ICHREE, 32 countries delivered their statements. There were 13 countries that rejected the ICHREE report and 19 that supported it. Countries rejecting the ICHREE report argued, "The Council is using the opportunity to advance a particular political agenda. The report manifestly lacks neutrality, impartiality and rationality. The report is a significant trespass on Ethiopia's sovereignty. The Ethiopian government's peace initiatives are to be commended and solutions should be sought only through the African Union. The international community should support the Ethiopian government's efforts find lasting solutions and not meddle in Ethiopia's internal affairs. The Ratner Mercenary Group and monetization of human suffering. The Ratner Mercenary Group is in it for the money. It is strictly business," says Alemayehu. They have a one-size-fits-all boilerplate human rights report which they will customize for their clients based on a narrative that is given to them, he continues. They will cut and paste and modify their standard templates to deliver whatever report their clients demand of them. A comparison of the Cambodia, Sri Lanka and Ethiopia reports shows how the Ratner hit team recycles the same template over and over again to line their pockets, he says. The Ratner Mercenary Group is available for hire by anyone who is willing to pay them top dollar for their services. Their motto, "Have law books," will travel anywhere in the world for a hit job in the name of human rights. Black ants, red ants, law book-toting hit teams and ants are a source of wisdom in African folktales as strong, hard-working, cooperative and determined creatures. 2 ants can carry 1 grasshopper. When ants unite, they can lift an elephant. There is a putatively African folktale about ants that is apt to Ethiopia's current situation. It is said if you collect 100 black ants and 100 red ants and put them in a glass jar, nothing will happen. They will go about their business, Alemayo continued. But if you take the jar, shake it violently and leave it on the table, the ants will start attacking and killing each other. Red ants believe the black ants are the enemy and vice versa. But the real enemy is the one who shook the jar. So it is in Ethiopia according to the scholar. There are 120 million hard-working, prosperity-seeking, cooperative and mutually supporting ants in Ethiopia. Then come the jar shakers with their hit men and women toting the gospel of human rights and preaching fire and brimstone to Ethiopians. Alemayo finds James Russell Lowell's poem The Present Crisis appropriate in understanding the lies, damned lies and disinformation used by the New West to demonize Ethiopia, dehumanize, brutalize and polarize its people and weaponize human rights to keep Ethiopia in perpetual poverty. When a deed is done for freedom, through the broad earth's aching breast runs a thrill of joy prophetic, trembling on from east to west, careless seems the great avenger, history's pages but record, one death grapple in the darkness twixt old systems and the word, truth forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne, yet that scaffold sways the future, and, behind the dim unknown, standeth God within the shadow, keeping watch above his own. Standeth God within the shadow, keeping watch above his own Ethiopia. We won't back down. We will stand our ground. Ethiopia shall prosper. Ethiopians shall live in peace. Ethiopia shall persevere. Ethiopia shall overcome. Ethiopia shall prevail. Because standeth God within the shadow, keeping watch above his own Ethiopia. Thanks for staying with us. Don't forget to like, share, post your comments, and subscribe to our channel. Let's work with the algorithm of the platform. These are the ways you can support our channel to continue producing this and similar contents. May God bless Ethiopia and its people. Thanks again.